So now we're going to talk about the 1950s, and this is actually a very fun era, and definitely becoming much more positive, and things are starting to look up for the economy and all that's went on in the last previous decades. So whenever like today's Hollywood starlets refer to a traditional old school glamour, 1950s makeup and style is what they were talking about. During the 50s, beauty trends reached a completely new level, and women everywhere participated by utilizing revolutionary colors, products, and techniques. Now, with the constraints of the war and coming towards the end, women were returning from working on the land and in the factories to become more domestic goddesses. So they became more housewives and worked at home. Economy was getting much stronger. The trend was looking very stylish and well-groomed, with eyebrows becoming more defined, mascara, eyeliner becoming heavier, and lips intensely colored. This emphasized the pale complexions that were very fashionable at the time. The introduction of the TV era meant that everyone was aware of glamour and fashion, unlike back in the 30s, 20s, and therefore earlier than that. I mean, they really didn't have a whole lot other than looking at women off the street, and then of course the magazines that were coming out, and then motion picture. But TV came to play in the 50s, and that really changed a whole different viewpoint on how things were looked at, monitored, and influenced. So the advent of color, of course, motion picture is what led to the explosion of the 1950s makeup. And so all of a sudden there was an explosion of color appearing in dresses, dress shops, and makeup collections for sure. After years of light glamour, stars on the big screen suddenly appeared with perfect faces. So women everywhere wanted the same thing. So a lot of what's going on even till today is just circulating the whole psychological aspect, but it's just on a different medium. Now we have internet, we have social media, we have Twitter and all that. So back then that situation was more about TV. So you can see how we all still have the same thinking, but it's just coming into different mediums and modalities. Because of this, Max Factor, who invented the pancake foundation, that would use to mimic what was being seen on the big screen, and like many new lines of brightly colored eyeshadows and lipsticks came into play. Similar to today's products, pancake was applied to the skin to cover up any imperfections in a quest to achieve like a movie star-like standard of beauty. The subtle 50s makeup, women's magazine began featuring guides to makeup application, and women everywhere started to experiment with cosmetics. The pancake would be applied to neutralize the face. Then the mixing of colors would begin, and a bold, colorful canvas would emerge in form of like very cherry red lips. It would just be crazy how so much of the influence of those looks would be into play. I definitely want to express that when that look came out, it was definitely something that I could tell from looking at the research pictures. Many of what was being done was to really try to change what was happening from the past and really creating a new movement. Going again, the cherry lips, rosy cheeks, the neutral tone eyelids was pretty much the set standard. It was later in the decade when the 50s were approaching the 60s, companies began adding titanium to their products to tone down the bright color of many products, resulting in much more of a natural look. So I would say the early 50s was much more bright, and then towards the end of the 50s, they were transitioning into much more natural looks. even though they still use the liners and things like that, they backed off on using too much color. So this was the decade where, obviously it was fashionable and glamorous to be a homemaker. Women began baking apple pies and vacuuming in the house in heels, dresses, and fully made up faces. So if you watch a lot of the old TV shows, and I would definitely encourage all of you to do so, and there's like Turner Classics on cable, and there's also TV Land that shows a lot of the Leave It to Beavers and Dennis the Menace and I Love Lucy's and all the old shows from those eras. Watch them because you can really see how they portrayed women, and even though some of them are still in black and white, you can get an idea of how the application of these looks were. And you see women vacuuming with pearls on and full face makeup. Cosmetic companies capitalized on this emerging trend and targeted ads towards married women who had to look good for their husbands. So this was like such a very, very conservative but traditionalist era, and very interesting. Women are very sexy in the house for their husband, and it was really hip to be married and have a house and 1.2 kids, and all, having that white picket fence kind of lifestyle, and having your coffee socials and things like that. That was a very big era back then. A lot of women masked a lot of what was going on in their home, because it was more about image and keeping up with the Joneses. But 1950s also, you had much more of another side to the looks of what was going on, like the greaser looks, where the biker guys with the slick back hair and the pompadours, and that was really, really, really big. The twin set outfits with the girls wearing their little sweater twin sets, and the hair was really perfect, and women definitely played a more submissive role with men. So one of a great movie to see, even though it really wasn't from that era, but definitely did a great study of it, is Grease, because they really over-exaggerated that era, and also the TV show Happy Days. So really watch those types of references, because that really will get you more in tune with what was happening back then. And so now that we're going to approach towards the 60s, this is a whole nother era. So the late 50s was definitely starting to trickle into what was going to happen in the 60s. So stay tuned for the 1960s, and definitely look really into what went on in the 1950s.